Your Excellency, Mr. Kumar Tuhin, Ambassador of India to Budapest, Professor Udayanarayan Singh, Vice Chancellor, Amity University, and all guests present. It is my my pleasure to talk about Rabindranath Tagore and Shantiniketan and Shantiniketan's connection to Hungarians. I have studied in Shantiniketan myself between 1994 and 98, and it has been a constant project of interest for me to see who was there before me. And I found that Shantiniketan was one of the most important connecting points between Hungarians and Indians. I would like to share with you some images and a brief PowerPoint presentation about Hungarians in Shantiniketan to commemorate Rabindranath Tagore's birth. So I'm now going to share my screen. So we know about Hungarians visiting Bengal from the 19th century onwards, and one of the most important personalities, if not the most important personality to visit Bengal, was Alexander Csoma de Körös. He is known for as the founder of the modern discipline Tibetology. However, he also learned Bengali, and he was also in touch with leading intellectuals of Bengal, including Rabindranath Tagore's grandfather. After Alexander Csoma de Körös, there were very important Hungarian personalities like Count Manó Andrássy, the brother of the first Prime Minister of Hungary after the compromise, and Count Béla Széchenyi, who was the son of the great Hungarian reformer István Széchenyi. Also, the later Admiral Miklós Horthy visited India in the 19th century. There were also women travelers, like pictured on this in this book. But these people were more or less tourists after Alexander Csoma de Körös, who lived for an extended period in Calcutta. The new engagement with India started in the 1920s, and interestingly, it also coincided with an interest in Shantiniketan. I'm going to talk about three visitors in the 1920s who defined the image of Shantiniketan. The first of them is Ferenc Balázs, who is a Transylvanian writer, and he was a Unitarian clergyman from Transylvania who studied in Oxford and Berkeley. And on his way back home to Transylvania from Berkeley, he decided not to come via America and Europe, but go towards Japan and visit India. Unitarianism is a Christian denomination which believes in the unity of one God. And they have historically developed connections with the Brahmo Samaj. So Ferenc Balázs already was acquainted with the Brahmo Samaj during his studies, as he was studying with some Indian students. He was also interested in rural experiments, as he became a vicar in a Transylvanian village. When he met Tagore, and as our documents show he was the first Hungarian to visit Shantiniketan in 1926. He writes about Tagore as Tagore is beautiful in the fullness of peace, love, wisdom, art, and creative eagerness of his soul, with all the enduring values of life. Naturally, he was the most interested in the experiments going on in Sriniketan. Now, the greatest name of 20th century writing about India in Hungarian is that of Ervin Baktai, who has traveled to India between 1926 and 29 and visited Tagore in Shantiniketan a few months after Ferenc Balázs. He has written 2 books about his travels in India. He was trained as a painter in the school of Simon Hollósy, a Hungarian Impressionist school, but became interested in the spiritual East. And as the maternal uncle of Amrita Shergill, he was closely acquainted with Umrao Singh Shergill, from whom he has learned a lot about the spiritual East. He studied Sanskrit and spent 3 years in India, as I have mentioned. He wrote popular books about India, travelogues about yoga, about Indian mythology, astrology, Indian art, and also a biography of Alexander Chomodek. He was in contact with Rabindranath Tagore. Here is one of their first exchanges. He was also in contact with other leading Indian figures, including Mahatma Gandhi. And the writings of Bhaktai are characterized by high appreciation of Indian culture. And he sided with the Indian freedom movement. He was quite unique in this endeavor, even amongst Hungarians and also on the international field. There were a few people like C.F. Andrews and others who were sympathetic towards Gandhi and Tagore, and Bhaktai was probably the Hungarian equivalent of C.F. Andrews in his sympathy, although he didn't spend extended periods of time either with Tagore or with Gandhi. Two visitors, Elisabeth Schasch-Brunner and Elisabeth Brunner, her daughter, were also painters, and they were welcomed by Tagore in Shantiniketan, and their initial impressions of India were so overwhelming that they decided to settle down in India. And eventually Elisabeth Brunner was received an honorary doctorate from Shantiniketan. They lived for several months in Shantiniketan and witnessed the rural life in Shantiniketan. Also, Elisabeth Brunner was allowed to go into Tagore's house and paint him when he was doing all kinds of things like writing or reading or just walking around in a garden. The next important Hungarian couple to Shantiniketan is husband and wife, this time Julius Germanus and Rózsa Hajnóci. I would like to draw your attention here to the clothes. They are just fully European. These are the European professors in Shantiniketan, and as it was expected from them in colonial times, they were really dressed as Europeans, not mixing with the Indians. But this was not, this was only towards Shantiniketan, because when we see Julius Germanus in other attire, we see that he was really ready to identify with Oriental cultures, especially with the Islamic East. His wife, Rózsa Hajnóci, has produced a book, The Fire of Bengal, which many people know. This is one of the most widely read books about India in the 20th century. And it has got really deep insight into the life of Shantiniketan in the 1920s and early 30s. However, it has also got its shortcomings, as Rózsa Hajnóci didn't know English, so all the information came through other people who knew German, or who translated to her husband. And the contrast of the clothes. This is Etta Ghosh, who came to India as Boglar Etelka and was married to the poet Shanti Ghosh in 1937 in Shantiniketan. And this is a photograph made soon after their marriage. Etta Ghosh took up the life of an Indian lady and helped visitors and Tagore's contacts with visitors in Shantiniketan. This is something when Etta Ghosh is back to Hungary in 1959 and doing more or less the same thing what we are doing now, celebrating the anniversary of Tagore. It was in 1959 when there were already preparations for Tagore's centenary in 61, and in that way, Etta Ghosh was also called back to Hungary, and here she is reading up her memories of Tagore at the Hungarian radio. She went back to Shantiniketan, but eventually came back to Hungary, where she died in 1963. Another very interesting traveler, and little known in Hungary, but very well known in Transylvania, is Ödön Jakabos, who was not acquainted with the higher Indian society like Tagore and Gandhi as the previous travelers, but he was a railway dispatcher from Transylvania. And he hailed from a village which was hailed from Kovasna, a place close to the native village of Alexander Csoma-de-Körös. And he went to India, to the tomb of Alexander Csoma-de-Körös, where he is pictured in Darjeeling. And he was an Esperantist connected to over 300 pen friends, and traveled to India without means, relying on local help. So in the he had pen friends all over India, and he always asked just money for a ticket to his next destination and refused to accept money for first class. He just wanted to do the simplest travel possible. So his view was a middle class India, and he arrived to Shantiniketan empty stomached, and his pen friend didn't offer him lunch, so he was quite upset, but eventually he found an Esperantist in Shantiniketan who took him as a guest. So his travelogue is interesting because it's a very vivid description of India, which is not the tourist's India, as it is much more the lower middle class India, and a European traveler who makes his way in spite of thousands of odds which he faces because of his lack of money. He wrote books. He wrote his travelogue, which was published in Transylvania, and held innumerable talks about his trip to India, which in Transylvania, in Romania, was one of the highlights of the contact with India for Hungarians. Later, a bust of his was unveiled, and the school was renamed after him. The last visitor I would like to mention is Sándor Sára, who visited Shantiniketan in 1997, and I was a student there and I was his guide. He published, he held exhibitions of his photographs, as well as prepared a film about his trip to India. Unfortunately, in Shantiniketan, he only made a film, and no photograph of his is available of Shantiniketan. So connections with Shantiniketan are still ongoing, and make one of the most important contact points of the cultural contacts between India and Hungary. So I thank you for your attention, and I hope that many of you who are now listening to this talk will eventually visit Shantiniketan, which is really worth visiting, primarily because of Rabindranath Tagore and the cultural ethos that he created, but secondarily also because of the Hungarians who have been there and connected to Rabindranath Tagore and his university. Thank you.